Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my book club. I read 10 books in March, which we're going to talk about today. But before we get to that, let's just quickly talk about February. So in February, I didn't do very many videos. I didn't do a recap video for February, and that's because we got a new puppy. There was some other stuff going on, and I really just didn't have the mental energy or space or ability to be reading very much. So I only got through 2 books in February. One and a half, really. I read 1 book, and I listened to about the back half of an audiobook that I started in January. So let's quickly knock those off. First off, the book I read was The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan, which was fantastic. I have a whole video up for it, 𝕬𝕬𝕜𝕚. It is a fantastic continuation of Book 1. It takes some of the more traditional tropes that Book 1 was playing with and then kind of twists them a bit. It really starts to expand on the characters and their arcs. We see from characters' points of views that we didn't before. And we massively expand on like the political system and the political climate and all the different factions at play in the world, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic, even better than Book 1, 5 stars. Secondly, I listened to Call to Arms by Jay Allen, which is Book 2 of the Blood on the Stars series. I think I've mentioned before that military sci-fi is like totally my jam, and I am just a nut for it. With the Lost Fleet series by Jack Campbell being by far my favorite that I've found so far. So I'm always chasing that sort of spaceships fighting, fleet fighting sort of combat. I wasn't super keen on the first book of the Blood on the Stars series. I think I gave it like a 2 stars. Maybe a 2 out of 10 even. The characters were generic and boring. There weren't very many character arcs, and the actual combat was fine, but not amazing. And I got much of the same in Book 2. I thought it was slightly better than Book 1, but we still have the same characters. They're still generic and pretty boring. The action is slightly better. And so I ended up giving it another 2 stars. It's fine, but nothing special. But it was interesting enough and easy enough to read that I decided to just go ahead and grab the 3rd audiobook in the series, which was the first book I listened to in March, Ruins of Empire by Jay Allen. And this one, again, I thought was slightly better. We still have the issue of the crew in the ship. Basically, we have the generic starship crew. We've got a captain who worries he might be there because of nepotism, but actually is brilliant and is fantastic and everybody loves him. We've got a really hard-as-nails XO who is best friends with the captain and is really good at supporting them. We've got the gung-ho Marines. We've got the hotshot pilots. Everyone is kind of just playing the role that you would expect from their position. And what's more, by this point, I was really hoping that we would have moved on from the sort of crew dynamic that we have, which is that everyone on Dauntless, which is the ship that the crew flies, everyone on Dauntless is just the best at what they do. Like, Dauntless has the best Marines, the best pilots, the best gunners. No one on Dauntless is bad. Like, there is no crew conflict. There's no dynamics at play that's particularly interesting because everyone's just really good at what they do and no one ever screws up. I think I'd like it a lot more if the characters developed a bit and if the characters changed. I think some of these characters need to go and get replaced by people that aren't as good. You know, there's this big war effort going on. We can't have all of our best people, you know, taking promotions but not having to leave their posts on this one ship. Yeah, it's very Mary Sue-y. I think this is probably where I'll stop with the series. I've given it 3 books, and none of which super captivated me, so I'm going to go ahead and give this one another 2 stars. Fine, but not for me. Next, I finally read Hyperion, full review, 𝕬𝕬𝕜𝕚. I loved it. I have a huge problem with the ending. This is the story of 7 pilgrims making their way to a planet where the time tombs are opening, and there is this mysterious, enigmatic antagonist known as the Shrike, some sort of weird creature that is killing people that come nearby. There is a lot of mysteries in this book, and each of the stories gives you just a little bit more of the answers to let you kind of know what's going on. And the whole book, we're sort of building towards trying to figure out what happened. And then the book ends and just stops. There's no climax, there's no cliffhanger, there's no big question at the end, there's no answers, there's no revelations. The story just stops without anything. And I get that it's meant to be about the journey and not about the destination. But the journey in this case was exploring this mystery, trying to figure out what was going on. Why were we picked to go to the time tombs? What is the Shrike? What is the time tombs? What's happening here? And none of that happens in this book. And that's really my only issue. I really loved the rest of the book, so it is getting a 4 stars from me. It's like a 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 book. I really did enjoy it. Next, I read Earthcore by Scott Sigler, 𝕬𝕬𝕜𝕚. I'm going to run out of 𝕬𝕬𝕜𝕚s, I think. I only get like 5 cards. This was a book that I found on many lists of best cave books of all time. I adore cave books. Books like The Luminous Dead, The Descent, The Moor, The Anomaly. I just really, really, really love cave books, the tight, claustrophobic feeling. And so this book disappointed me because this isn't a cave book. Scott Sigler himself responded to my video letting me know that it's not a cave book. It's a techno thriller. And so if you do read this, go into it not expecting a cave book because it's not really here. I don't know why that was on so many cave book lists. Overall, though, this one didn't excite me too much, but the imagination at play with the sort of antagonist that's going on is super interesting. And the imagination shown by Scott Sigler here was enough to get me to start reading another one of his books, which I will talk about maybe this month, which I will happily say so far I'm loving. So stay tuned for that. But as for now, Earthcore gets a 2 stars. Next up, Bloody Rose. I, again, review 𝕚𝕬𝕜, if I've still got 𝕚𝕬𝕜s left. This is the follow-up to Kings of the Wild, which was my favourite fantasy book I read last year. And Bloody Rose is my favourite fantasy book I've read so far this year. Nicholas Eames is my favourite fantasy writer. This is a book about found family, a book about meeting your heroes, finding out not only who they are, but who you are. In this book, we follow Tam Hashford. She's a girl from a small town. She's been working in a tavern when she finally gets to live up to her dream of becoming a mercenary and joining one of the groups and bands that roam around the world. She becomes the bard for Bloody Rose's mercenary gang, one of the most famous gangs in the world right now. And then we explore this world, whereas in Kings of the Wild, we were talking about how once bands would protect civilization from monsters. They would take jobs from townsfolk to clear out wyverns and griffins and help keep the town and the roadways safe. That job's been completed by the time we get to the world of Bloody Rose. There really isn't like a need for adventurers to be protecting towns. Nowadays, they go to stadiums, they go to arenas, and they fight monsters that have been captured and hobbled, and then they just play up for the crowd, put on a good show, and then go on with their day drinking and whatever it is they want to do. And so this is a story about trying to find glory in this world that is very different than the one that all the heroes the bards talk about grew up in. And it's really, really well done. The characters are absolutely phenomenal. The pacing is fantastic. The storyline perfectly keeps building up to making you think it's coming to a conclusion, and then gives you a twist or a reveal that just snaps you back into the middle of the story and makes it you realize that there's still a lot of book left. And it was just fantastic. 5 stars. Easy 5 stars. Up next is The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. Ian Banks writes sci-fi under the name Ian M. Banks, and they are some of my favorite books of all time. They're all over here. But this is the first of his non-science fiction books I've read, and I have to admit, it wasn't for me. I will have a full review coming up for this one, but this is the story about a deeply troubled individual living a kind of secluded lifestyle when they hear that their brother, who was put into a psychiatric facility, has escaped and is on their way back. Their brother was known for setting dogs on fire, for terrorizing the local children, and now he's worried he's going to come back and do the same things. And we explore this through the mind of a deeply, deeply troubled individual. The writing is phenomenal. This is very clearly a book a lot of people are going to like. For me, it just wasn't my jam. It just wasn't sort of what I was looking for. It gets 3 stars for me because it is a good book, but it's not one I'd particularly like to reread. It was confronting and hard at times. Up next is Interceptor City by Dan Abnett. Dan Abnett wrote one of my favorite Warhammer 40k novels of all time, Double Eagle, which is about the aerial fighters of the Aeronautica Imperialis, basically the Air Force, in dogfighting, fighter planes, bombers, all of that sort of stuff, and it was just so interesting. And this is a sequel, not really a direct sequel. You probably do want to read Double Eagle first, but you could read Interceptor City without it. You'll just be spoiled some of the eventual fates of some of the players involved in Double Eagle. Interceptor City follows a former ace pilot who has since basically retired from fighter piloting, as they are tricked or conned into serving again as a fighter pilot with an air wing with just disastrous turnover rates. This is because they're fighting not in the open sky that we saw in Double Eagle, but in a dead hive city. This is fighter planes maneuvering down streets, dodging pedestrian walkways, dodging light posts, swinging around different spires and around churches, diving under manufactories. It is edge of your seat flying action. It is fantastic. I think for my money, I prefer Double Eagle still just a little bit because it does kind of have fighters and bombers and ground crew kind of talked about, whereas in this one we are just focusing on the fighter pilots. And the ending, while I think is fine, is not sort of as climactic and as interesting as I was hoping for. Overall, though, it gets 4 stars from me. It was super, super interesting. Then we get to Fall of Hyperion by Dan Simmons, and this book is more like it. Here is where we get all of the conclusions, all of the finales, all of the explanations that the first book was building up. It doesn't make me forgive the first book for the way it ended. This probably should have just been one very long book, but I can see why it was split into 2. I don't want to give any spoilers for Hyperion, but Fall of Hyperion is easily my preferred book of the 2. I really, really loved Fall of Hyperion. I thought it was exciting, entertaining. It gets a 4 stars from me. I thought it was really, really good. It's like 4.5 stars. It's like 9 out of 10. I will do a review of this one at some point soon for my full thoughts. Then I read Raven 1 by Kevin Miller. This is part of my, I don't know, midlife crisis where I've decided I'm really into fighter planes all of a sudden. I'm playing fighter plane simulators. I've got the full joystick and throttle setup, the full HOTAS setup, and I am reading books about it, watching shows and documentaries about it. And one of the novels I've read recently is Raven 1. It follows the pilot of a F-18 Hornet as they go on deployment around and near Iran. Tensions are very high with Iran in this book. The airspace is closed off, and they are flying around Iraq as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom when things go wrong and they get into conflicts. And the writing is so well done. The first almost third of this book is just chapter after chapter talking about one carrier landing, one like almost failed carrier landing. And it is just riveting. I think you probably want to know a little bit about fighter planes going into this one. It really does feel like military fighter pilot life. It doesn't hold back from using military terms and jargon that you might not know. There is a glossary right at the front of the book to kind of help you, but I did find myself flipping back and forth quite a lot, even after all the fighter plane stuff I've been immersing myself in. So you probably want to know some of that information going in, but if you do, it's really, really exciting. It's my first military fiction book I've kind of ever read, and I really enjoyed it. It gets 4 stars. Before I get to the last 2, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone that comments. Thank you so much to everyone that's subscribed. I'm really, really appreciative of all the support I've received. If you aren't subscribed yet, or if you're not sure, I would just ask if you could check. A lot of the people that watch my videos aren't subscribed just right now, and so it would really help the channel out. But the final 2 books I read in March. The first one was book 3 of Dungeon Crawler Carl, The Dungeon Anarchists Cookbook by Matt Dinniman. And this is the 3rd Dungeon Crawler Carl book I've read so far. I've loved all of them. I think I like this book more than book 2, but a little bit less than book 1. In this one, we're on a floor of the dungeon that is entirely made up of train lines and train stations. And it does get very confusing at times with all the different lines and names and station names that are happening. But overall, I did find it very entertaining. It has the same great characters. The action remains very, very high. And overall, if you're not reading Dungeon Crawler Carl yet, I really think you should. It's fantastic. 4 stars. And finally, I read Old Man's War by John Scalzi. This is a story set in the future where humanity has spread to the stars. We have colonies out amongst the stars, and we found we're very much not alone in the universe. And unfortunately, habitable planets come at a premium, and basically everyone wants to fight for them. And so humanity has set up the Colonial Defense Force. This is an army that goes out amongst the stars to fight other alien races, to take their planets, protect our own planets, disrupt their plans, and support our own plans. I don't want to spoil too much of what happens in this book because it's very exciting. I will just say that the premise of this book is that if you are on Earth and you reach 75 years of age, you can enlist in the Colonial Defense Force, and then rumor is somehow they will make you young again so you can serve in the army for them. This book has one of the best opening lines I've ever read, and it goes, "On my 75th birthday, I did 2 things. First, I visited my wife's grave. Second, I joined the army." Which is just a really exciting opening line. I really enjoyed that. Overall, though, I was actually a tiny bit disappointed with Old Man's War. With the way it gets suggested a lot, I thought it was going to be, I don't know, just slightly better than it was. I did really enjoy it. It's getting 4 stars from me. It was a fantastically fun book. And it was a very easy to read book. I thought it was a bit lighthearted at times when it could have been a bit darker. I thought the characters were mostly just fine. The main character I really, really liked, but our supporting cast is just a bit okay. And there are quite a few occurrences which just seem so unlikely to actually occur that they just kind of took me out of it a little bit. But overall, I did really enjoy it. So there you have it. That's everything I read in March and February. But before I let you go, we need to pick a book from my TBR jar. This is my TBR jar. In it is every book on my shelf that I haven't yet read. Last video, it picked for us Earthcore by Scott Sigler, which was a bit down on that book, but very excited by the book I'm reading now by Scott Sigler, so I'm going to say it's a net positive. Let's pick a new book. The only rule is if it is a long fantasy series, I'm just going to pull again because I am currently reading Wheel of Time and I don't want 2 huge fantasy series at the same time. I'm nervous. All right, I've got this one. Let's see. Can you read that? Ball Lightning. Oh, this is by, it was right there. This is by Cixin Liu, who is the author of the 3 Body Problem series, which I adored. So I'm really excited to read this one. I've had this book for quite a while, but I just haven't gotten to it. The blurb sounds really interesting. On his 14th birthday, right before his eyes, Chen's parents are incinerated by a blast of ball lightning. Striving to make sense of this bizarre tragedy, he dedicates his life to unlocking the secrets of this enigmatic natural phenomenon. His pursuit of ball lightning takes him far from home, chasing storms across mountain peaks and into highly classified subterranean laboratories. But Chen's obsession can't insulate him from the real world's interest in his discoveries. He will be pitted against scientists, soldiers, and governments with motives of their own. A physicist who has no place for moral judgment, a beautiful army major obsessed with new ways to wage war, a desperate nation facing certain military defeat. I believe this happens in the same universe as the Three-Body Problem, but occurs before those books, because I think the main character in this book appears in the Three-Body Problem, but I could be wrong. So, I will see you guys sometime in the next month with a review for Ball Lightning. If you want to pick up any of the books we've talked about today, then make sure to check out the description below. I will have a link for them. If there's any books I've talked about today that don't have a full review video up that you really want to hear about, then let me know. I'm planning to make quite a few videos, but if you let me know which ones you're interested in, that'll help me make sure that that happens. But most of all, do all the algorithm stuff and keep reading. Thank you so much. Ciao.